Some people don't argue with who you are today. They argue with who you used to be. They replay old stories, repeat past mistakes, and remind you of a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Not to help you, not to understand you, but to keep you familiar. Smaller, predictable. If this has happened to you, it's not accidental, and it's not harmless. When someone keeps dragging up your past, it usually means your present threatens them. Your growth disrupts a story they rely on, a story where you stay the same and they don't have to change. Stoic philosophy cuts through this illusion with brutal clarity. The Stoics taught that people cling to judgments because judgments protect their ego. Letting go of your past version would force them to face their own stagnation. In this video, we'll break down what it truly means when people won't let your past die and how to respond the Stoic way. Calm, grounded, unshaken, no defending. Reason number 1. Your growth threatens their identity. When someone keeps bringing up your past, the first thing to understand is this. Your growth is uncomfortable for them, not because growth is wrong, but because it disrupts the role they assigned you in their inner world. Every relationship carries an unspoken agreement. People quietly decide who you are to them, the reckless one, the weak one, the troublemaker, the follower, the one who never changes. That mental image gives them certainty. It helps them feel stable. Sometimes it even helps them feel superior. And then you change. You become calmer when you are reactive, more disciplined where you are chaotic, more selective where you used to chase approval. That shift doesn't just upgrade you, it threatens them. Because if you can change, then the story they've been telling themselves collapses. The story where they are ahead, where they were right about you, where they don't have to question their own choices. So instead of updating their perception, they reach backward. They grab your past and drag it into the present like evidence. Remember when you used to, you're still the same person who, this is just like before. This isn't memory. It's defense. The Stoics understood this pattern thousands of years ago. They observed that people resist change not because it harms them, but because it destabilizes their identity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that when others act irrationally, it's often because they are protecting an inner illusion about who they are and who you are allowed to be. When someone keeps resurrecting your past, they're often trying to freeze you in time, not consciously, not maliciously in most cases, but instinctively. Your growth forces a silent comparison, and comparison awakens discomfort. They may feel left behind, they may feel exposed, they may feel smaller in your presence than they used to. So they try to restore the old balance, not by rising to meet you, but by pulling you back. This is why arguments rarely help. Explaining rarely works. Defending yourself almost never changes anything. Because the issue isn't a misunderstanding, it's identity preservation. Stoicism teaches a hard but liberating truth here. You are not responsible for maintaining the version of yourself that makes others comfortable. Epictetus warned that when you begin to value your character over your reputation, friction is inevitable. People who benefited from your old self may resist the new one. Not openly, but subtly, through reminders of who you used to be. And this is where many people lose their power. They start apologizing for growth, over-explaining changes, trying to prove they're different now. But from a Stoic perspective, this is a mistake. Growth doesn't need permission. Transformation doesn't require consensus. Your task is not to convince them you've changed, but to embody the change consistently. Silence, discipline, and alignment speak louder than any defense ever could. When you stop reacting to past accusations, something important happens. The power shifts. They either adapt or they reveal their inability to move forward. And that revelation is clarity, not cruelty. Remember this, People who truly care about your growth may need time, but they will adjust. People who need you to stay the same will keep reminding you of who you were. That distinction matters. Stoicism doesn't ask you to hate these people. It asks you to see them clearly. See that their resistance is about their inner struggle, not your failure. See that your responsibility is not to soothe their discomfort, but to protect your integrity. Growth always creates tension before it creates distance, and distance is sometimes the price of becoming who you're meant to be. If someone keeps bringing up your past, ask yourself this quietly. Who would I have to remain for them to feel safe? Then ask a better question. Is that a role I'm willing to keep playing? A Stoic knows the answer, even if they never say it out loud. Reason number 2. They use your past to regain control. When people keep bringing up your past, it's rarely just nostalgia. Very often it's a power move, not an obvious one, not loud or aggressive, but subtle, psychological, quietly effective. Your past is familiar territory. They know it, they understand how to use it. And when they feel their influence over you slipping, they reach for the one thing that once worked, your old weaknesses. Think about this carefully. The moment you become calmer, harder to provoke, less reactive, less dependent on validation, you become difficult to control. You stop feeding emotional loops. You stop explaining yourself. You stop asking for permission to exist as you are. For some people, that loss of access feels threatening. So they reopen old chapters. They bring up who you used to be when you were insecure, when you were impulsive, when you doubted yourself. Why? Because those versions of you were easier to steer. This is not about the truth. It's about leverage. The Stoics were deeply aware of this dynamic. Epictetus taught that no one can truly harm you unless you hand them the power to do so. And power in human relationships often comes from emotional reactions. When someone mentions your past and you tense up, when you rush to defend, when you feel the urge to explain, justify, or correct the narrative, they feel it. At that moment, they know the lever still works. So they pull it again. This is why some people bring up your past only when they feel challenged. When you set a boundary, when you say no, when you don't react the way you used to, when you stand firm instead of bending, the past becomes a tool to destabilize your present. They may not even realize they're doing it consciously. Most control tactics aren't planned. They're instinctive, a reflex developed over years of interaction. But intent doesn't change impact. Here's the hard Stoic truth. If mentioning your past still shakes you, it still controls you. And Stoicism is not about pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about removing its authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you always have the option of having no opinion. That insight is radical when applied here. You don't have to argue with the past. You don't have to disprove it. You don't even have to deny it. You only have to stop responding to it as if it defines you. Control collapses when reaction disappears. Notice what happens when you don't bite. When they bring up your past and you don't rush to explain. When you don't correct the story. When you don't apologize for who you no longer are. The conversation loses momentum. The tension dissolves. The power grab fails. This is deeply uncomfortable for them. Because control requires engagement. And this is where many people get confused. They think silence means weakness. They think non-response means agreement. They think calm means surrender. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Calm is not compliance. Silence is not submission. Detachment is not defeat. It is refusal. A refusal to play a game you've already outgrown. When you stop allowing your past to be used as a trigger, you reclaim something essential. Agency. You decide what matters now. You decide what version of yourself deserves oxygen. So you decide which narratives die from lack of attention. And here's the paradox. The less you fight to control the narrative, the more control you actually gain. People who depend on leverage eventually reveal themselves. They escalate. They repeat themselves. They grow frustrated because their old tools no longer work. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to punish these people. It asks you to withdraw the reward. No emotional payoff, no reactive explanation, no visible wound, just consistency. And consistency is terrifying to someone who relies on your instability. Ask yourself this, honestly and without self-judgment. Who in my life only brings up my past when they feel they're losing influence over me? That question alone can shift your entire perspective. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to accuse them. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You only need to live as someone whose past no longer grants access. The Stoics understood that freedom is not won by force, but by restraint, by choosing where your energy goes and where it doesn't. Your past can be acknowledged without being obeyed. It can be remembered without being weaponized. It can exist without ruling you. And when you truly internalize that, control changes hands, quietly, permanently, and without conflict. That is Stoic power. Reason number 3. They refuse to update their image of you. One of the most painful realizations you can have is this. Some people are not reacting to who you are now. They are reacting to a memory. They are interacting with a frozen version of you that exists only in their mind. And every time they bring up your past, what they're really saying is, I don't want to adjust how I see you. Not because you haven't changed, but because updating their image of you would require effort, humility, and self-reflection. Most people avoid all three. Human beings rely on mental shortcuts. Once we categorize someone, we rarely revisit that file. It's easier to keep an outdated label than to do the uncomfortable work of reassessment. So if you were once careless, you stay careless in their eyes. If you were once weak, you remain weak to them. If you once made mistakes, they silently decide that mistakes are who you are. Your growth threatens that convenience. Stoicism explains this clearly. Epictetus taught that people suffer not from reality, but from the judgments they cling to. And judgments, once formed, are defended like territory. Updating their image of you would mean admitting something subtle but difficult, that they were wrong, or at least incomplete, in how they judged you. For many people, that feels like a loss of control. So instead, they default to the past. They quote old behaviors as proof. They resurrect old stories as evidence. They treat your transformation as temporary, suspicious, or irrelevant. This is especially common in long-term relationships. Family, old friends, former partners, colleagues who knew you before you evolved. And they don't see your discipline. They don't see your restraint. They don't see the internal battles you've won because they stopped looking. And here's where it cuts deepest. Sometimes, the people who should be proud of your growth are the ones most resistant to it. Why? Because your change disrupts the emotional balance of the relationship. If you improve, the hierarchy shifts. If you mature, old dynamics lose relevance. If you stop reacting the way you used to, their role becomes unclear. So they cling to the old version of you, not because it's accurate, but because it's familiar. Stoicism doesn't sugarcoat this reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people act according to what seems right to them, even when they are wrong. And what seems right to many is stability over truth. Here's the hard truth you need to hear. You cannot force someone to update their perception of you. No explanation will do it. No argument will convince them. No proof will satisfy them. Because this is not an intellectual issue. It's an emotional one. They are attached to who you were because it serves them. And this is where many people exhaust themselves. They keep trying to demonstrate growth. They underperform maturity. They hope that if they behave well enough, long enough, they'll finally be seen. But Stoicism offers a different path. Instead of chasing recognition, it teaches detachment from misperception. You're not required to audition for a role you've already left. Seneca wrote that it is better to be unknown than to be misunderstood, because being misunderstood by those unwilling to see you clearly drains your spirit. When someone refuses to update their image of you, the Stoic response is not anger, it's acceptance without engagement. Acceptance that they may never see you clearly. Acceptance that their version of you may remain outdated. Acceptance that this is outside your control. And with that acceptance comes freedom. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not listening. You stop shrinking to fit an old mold. You stop carrying the weight of someone else's outdated narrative. Instead, you let your actions speak, not to convince them, but to remain aligned with yourself. And here's the paradox. Stoics understood well, when you stop trying to be seen, you become lighter. When you stop demanding understanding, you gain clarity. When you stop correcting perceptions, you protect your peace. Some people will eventually notice, so some will quietly adjust, and some will never change how they see you. That outcome is not a verdict on your growth. It's a reflection of their limits. Stoicism teaches that your responsibility ends at your character, not at other people's perceptions. Ask yourself this, honestly. Who am I still trying to prove myself to, and why? That question alone can expose invisible chains. You are allowed to evolve without permission. You are allowed to outgrow the image others keep of you. You are allowed to move forward even if they keep looking back. A Stoic doesn't demand to be understood. He chooses to be consistent. And consistency, over time, reveals the truth. Not to everyone, but to the only person who must live with it. You. Reason number 4. Your past triggers what they haven't healed. Sometimes, when people keep bringing up your past, it has very little to do with you at all. It's about what your past awakens inside them. There are wounds people never face, regrets they never process, versions of themselves they quietly resent. And instead of turning inward, they turn outward. Stoicism names this clearly: projection. When someone hasn't resolved their own past, seeing you move forward becomes unbearable. Your growth becomes a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable when we don't like what we see. So they redirect that discomfort. They talk about your mistakes to avoid their own. They dissect your old behavior to distract from their stagnation. They relive your past because they are trapped in theirs. But this is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human relationships. You assume they're criticizing you, but often they're confessing without knowing it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that people disturb themselves far more than they are disturbed by others. What looks like judgment is often inner conflict leaking outward. Think about it. Why does someone bring up your past repeatedly, even after you've changed? Why do they seem emotionally invested in reminding you who you used to be? Because if you can evolve, then they must confront why they haven't. And that confrontation is painful. It forces questions like, why am I still here? Why didn't I change? What excuses have I been hiding behind? Rather than face those questions, they externalize the tension. They focus on your old flaws because it gives them temporary relief. Not as long as you're still the problem, they don't have to look inward. Stoicism teaches that this is not cruelty. It's weakness, not moral weakness. Human weakness. Seneca observed that many people would rather accuse the world than examine themselves. Self-reflection requires courage. Projection requires none. This is why these interactions often feel emotionally draining. You're not just defending yourself. You're carrying someone else's unresolved pain. And here's where many people make costly mistakes. They try to reassure me. They try to explain. They try to show compassion by engaging. But compassion without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. Stoicism draws a firm line here. You are not responsible for healing wounds you didn't cause, and you're not obligated to relive your past to help someone avoid theirs. When someone keeps dragging up your history, ask yourself quietly, what are they refusing to face in themselves right now? That question changes everything. It shifts your response from emotional defense to emotional clarity. You stop taking the bait personally. You stop internalizing their discomfort. You stop trying to fix something that isn't yours to fix. And something powerful happens when you do this. The interaction loses its emotional charge. Because projection feeds on reaction. It needs engagement to survive. When you respond with calm detachment, not coldness, but grounded presence, you break the loop. You're no longer playing a role in their internal conflict, and that can feel unsettling to them. They may push harder, they may repeat themselves, they may escalate. Not because you're wrong, but because the old release valve is no longer working. This is where Stoic strength becomes visible, not in confrontation, not in clever words, but in emotional non-cooperation. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you can always choose to not be dragged into another person's inner chaos. Their turmoil does not require your participation. And this doesn't mean you become unkind. It means you become clear. Clear that their struggle is theirs. Clear that your growth doesn't need to be justified. Clear that you don't need to reopen closed chapters to soothe someone else's discomfort. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do, for both of you, is to stop engaging with the past entirely. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but decisively. You don't deny it, you don't defend it, because you simply stop giving it oxygen. Because here's a quiet truth Stoicism teaches: people heal when they are forced to sit with themselves, not when someone else carries the weight for them. If someone keeps bringing up your past, it may be because your presence highlights what they've been avoiding. And that's not your burden. You're allowed to move forward without dragging others along. You're allowed to outgrow shared narratives. You're allowed to let unresolved people remain unresolved. A Stoic understands that not every pain is meant to be healed together. Some journeys diverge not out of hatred, but out of necessity. And recognizing that is not cold, it's honest. You don't need to harden your heart. You only need to withdraw your past from their battlefield. Because the moment you stop fighting ghosts, you reclaim the present, and the present is where your power lives. Reason number 5. They benefit from you staying ashamed. There is a reason some people never let you forget who you used to be. And it's not a concern, it's not honesty, it's advantage. Shame is one of the most effective tools of control ever created. A person who feels ashamed is easier to manage, easier to silence, easier to keep small. When someone keeps bringing up your past, pay close attention to when they do it. It's rarely random. It often appears the moment you show confidence, the moment you assert a boundary, the moment you stop apologizing for existing. That's not a coincidence. For certain people, your shame is functional. It keeps the relationship tilted in their favor. As long as you feel guilty, you hesitate. As long as you feel embarrassed, you doubt yourself. As long as you feel like you owe something for your past, so that you stay compliant. Stoicism exposes this dynamic with ruthless clarity. The Stoics understood that shame, when weaponized, is not about morality. It's about leverage. Seneca warned that people will often remind you of your faults not to correct you, but to elevate themselves. Think about how this plays out. They don't mention your past when you're quiet. They don't mention it when you're agreeable. They bring it up when you step out of line, when you act outside the role they're comfortable with. Your past becomes a tool to pull you back into position. You shouldn't talk like that. Remember what you did. Who are you to say that, considering your history? Don't forget where you came from. On the surface, it sounds like humility. In reality, it's containment. Because a person weighed down by shame doesn't challenge narratives. And they don't set firm boundaries. They don't demand respect. They second-guess themselves before anyone else has to. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people need you to stay ashamed so they don't have to renegotiate the relationship. Your growth threatens the emotional economy they're used to. If you stop apologizing, they lose moral high ground. If you stop feeling guilty, they lose influence. If you stop carrying your past like a debt, they lose access. This is why Stoicism makes a sharp distinction between acknowledging the past and living in it. Acknowledgement is honest. Shame is obedient. A Stoic accepts responsibility without self-flagellation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that wasting time in regret is just another form of distraction. You learn, you are correct, you move forward, you do not kneel forever. But many people don't want that from you. They want you permanently humbled, permanently cautious, permanently unsure of your right to speak, choose, or lead. So they reopen old wounds, not to heal them, but to keep them bleeding just enough to control the outcome. This is where deep internal work is required. Because shame only works if you agree with it. If part of you still believes you must atone indefinitely, you'll react every time your past is mentioned. You'll explain, you'll justify, you'll shrink. And the pattern continues. Stoicism offers a different posture. It asks one brutal question: what purpose does my shame serve now? If it no longer guides improvement, if it no longer sharpens character, if it only keeps you submissive, then it is no longer a virtue. It is bondage. A Stoic does not deny mistakes, but he does not let others use those mistakes as a leash. There is a quiet confidence that comes when you make peace with your past internally, when you fully integrate it, not as a source of humiliation, but as evidence of evolution. When that happens, something changes externally. When someone brings up your past and you don't flinch, when there is no rush to defend, no visible shame, no collapse of posture, the tactic stops working, and this often confuses people. They expected guilt, they expected submission, they expected control. Instead, they meet composure, not arrogance, not defiance, just calm self-possession. That is deeply destabilizing to anyone who relies on your shame to maintain superiority. And yes, this may cost you certain relationships. Stoicism is honest about that. Some connections only survive as long as one person stays smaller. When you refuse to do that, distance naturally follows. Not as punishment, as consequence. You don't need to confront these people. You don't need to expose their motives. You don't need to explain your transformation. You only need to stop carrying shame that no longer belongs to you. Your past shaped you. It does not own you. And no one has the right to use your old self as a weapon against your present character. Ask yourself this with courage. Who benefits when I feel ashamed of who I used to be? Then ask a harder one. Am I willing to keep paying that price? A Stoic understands that dignity is not granted by others. It is reclaimed internally. And once reclaimed, it cannot be taken. No matter how often someone tries to reopen chapters you've already closed, your past can be honored without being obeyed. Your mistakes can be acknowledged without being relieved. Your growth can be real, even if it makes others uncomfortable. And the moment you stop being ashamed of who you were, you become unreachable through it. That is not ego. That is freedom. What Stoicism teaches you to do. The calm, unshakable response. After understanding why people keep bringing up your past, the real question becomes this: what do you do about it without losing yourself? Stoicism is not passive, but it is not reactive either. It offers a response that is quiet, disciplined, and deeply powerful. First, Stoicism teaches silence, not as avoidance, but as authority. When someone mentions your past, they are often fishing for a reaction, an explanation, a justification, an emotional opening. Silence denies them all three. Silence doesn't mean you agree. It means you refuse to argue with a version of yourself that no longer exists. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. When you stop responding emotionally, the provocation loses its purpose, as silence starves manipulation. Second, Stoicism teaches distance, not out of resentment, but clarity. Not everyone deserves access to your inner life. Some people only use proximity to reopen wounds. Distance is not punishment, it is protection. This doesn't always mean cutting people off dramatically. Often it means reducing emotional availability, shorter conversations, fewer explanations, clear boundaries expressed through behavior, not speeches. A Stoic understands that constant exposure to disrespect erodes character. Distance preserves it. Third, Stoicism teaches consistency, the most underestimated form of strength. You don't convince people you've changed by talking about it. You do it by living in alignment day after day without defending yourself. Consistency outlasts accusations. Consistency dissolves doubt. But consistency exposes motives. If someone keeps bringing up your past and you remain steady, calm, respectful, grounded, eventually one of two things happens. They adjust their behavior, or they remove themselves. Both outcomes are clear. Epictetus taught that your job is not to control how others see you, but to control how you live. Reputation is external. Character is yours. Here is the Stoic shift that changes everything. You stop asking, why won't they let it go? And you start asking, why am I still reacting? Because the moment your past stops provoking emotion, it stops being a weapon. This does not require confrontation. It requires inner resolution. You acknowledge your past privately. You learn from it honestly. You integrate it fully. And then, you move forward without carrying it into every room. When someone tries to drag you backward, you don't pull away angrily. You simply don't follow. Stoicism teaches that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the refusal to let conflict dictate your inner state. You don't owe anyone perpetual remorse. You don't owe anyone access to your evolution. You don't owe anyone an explanation for becoming better. Your life is not a courtroom. Your past is not on trial. The Stoic response is simple, but not easy. Be calm. Be consistent. Be selective with your energy. And above all, be unmoved. Because when you stop defending who you are today, you finally step into the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly who they've become. And that, more than any argument, ends the conversation for good. When people keep bringing up your past, it's easy to assume you're being judged. But as you've seen today, it's often something deeper. Your growth challenges their identity. Your calm weakens their control. Your freedom exposes what they haven't healed, and your lack of shame removes the leverage they once relied on. Stoicism doesn't ask you to fight these people. It asks you to outgrow the battlefield. You don't need to argue with memories. You don't need to defend who you are now. And you don't need permission to evolve. The practice is simple, but powerful. Respond with silence instead of reaction. Choose distance instead of resentment, and let consistent action speak louder than explanation. This week, notice what happens when someone brings up your past. Pause. Don't explain. Don't shrink. I just remain grounded in who you are today. That is Stoic strength in motion. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect and let me know in the comments what part hit closest to home. Your experience matters here. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you want to continue building inner calm, discipline, and unshakable self-respect, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.